Hello again, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to estimate right with Actionable Agile Analytics. My name is Iman, and I will be your host for this session. And I'm really happy to have you all here with us, joining us today. So before we get started, I would like to have some icebreakers. So can you just write down in the chat box where are you exactly from? Like just write down quickly your country so we can know our attendees where are they from. Nice. We have Amal from Tunisia. We have from the US, from Ethiopia. We have from Malta, Canada. Nice. Okay, Northern Ireland, Malta again. Lagos, Nigeria. We have Ghana also. Nice, nice. Have a lot of countries joining us today. Sweden. Hi, Brody. Okay, nice. Okay. Really nice that you have a lot of countries joining us today. Okay, so before diving into the webinar, I would like to introduce OnPoint. So we are an international software company and are a very proud partner with technology leaders like Atlassian and Microsoft. And here at OnPoint, we believe in the future of innovative business software solution. That's why we do specialize in customizing this solution to meet the unique needs of our clients. And today's webinar is a really special one as we have a guest all the way from Sweden. So Margaux will deliver a session today on how to estimate right with Actionable Agile Analytics.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Iman.
Hello.
So my name is Margaux. Yes. And I'm the head of customer experience at 55 Degrees. And today I'm really excited to kind of introduce the tool and how it can help teams across all the different industries to being a bit more agile and actually doing what matters.
Nice, nice. We are really excited for this webinar, Margaux. Really happy to have you joining us today. So I will just leave the floor and go ahead and deliver your session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So before I jump into showing you the tool and stuff, first we should talk a bit about the subject of this webinar and what problem are people trying to solve. So basically, more and more companies are forced to do an agile transformation. There's more requirement on metrics and being able to forecast or predict or just say how much work is going to be done. There's a lot of ways out there to do it. Some do estimates, some do probabilistic forecasting. So today I want to show you how you can use flow metrics to help you with that. So you can focus more on doing the work rather than gathering metrics and spending time in the analysis part. So I'm going to share my screen and show you ActionableAgile Analytics or tool. There you go. So now you should be able to see a whole bunch of dots and a whole lot of things. So before I jump into that, I should explain what ActionableAgile is. So ActionableAgile Analytics, like I said, it's a flow metrics tool. So what it does is that it's connected into your Jira. So nothing gets out, right? It's all in your Jira. Cloud or data center, doesn't matter. It works exactly the same way and it's the same app. There's no differences. So you would find it under the app. And what it does is that you can load a lot of different data that you have from your project, from your books, from your filters, anything you would like to analyze. Because to be able to forecast, be confident in saying how much work you're going to do in the future, first, you need to understand what is your context, where are you now, what's good, what's maybe not so good, and understand all of that to see if there's anything that should be improved or what works well and need to remain that way. So that's why ActionableAgile takes a deep dive into that data to give you insights into different charts. You can see we have a whole bunch of charts to help you with this, into targeting very precisely what you want to look at, so that you can then have meaningful conversation with your team. That's really the whole goal, right? Because usually when things don't go very well, it's because there's a communication problem somewhere. You're not really sure what is wrong, how to fix it. So we're here to help. Now, let's jump into ActionableAgile and flow metrics. So what do I mean by flow metrics? So if you're not familiar, those are Kanban, are very used in the Kanban methodology, but don't be scared because of this, because it would work no matter what you use. As long as you have a process, right, with different workflow steps, then you're good to go. But what those are is cycle time, the edge of your work, the amount of work in progress, and your throughput. And all of those key 4 flow metrics, what they do, they help you analyze what's going on with your work. So let's take a deep dive into the first one first, because before looking at the future, be able to estimate and forecast what you're going to do, first, you should start with what you've done, right? Looking at what was done, what has been completed, and understand what was good and maybe not so good. So on the cycle time scatter plot chart, which is what you see right now on my screen, you get a whole bunch of dots, right? So all those dots represent pieces of work that have been completed at some point. Now, what those are, that will of course completely depend on the work that you have loaded. So it could be stories, it could be tasks, it could be anything, right? What you've completed. They are plotted based on when they were completed and how old they were when they were completed. And that gives you very valuable information first on how long did it actually take you to do work until today. Because you might think, okay, we work in 2-week sprints, right? So we do work in 14 days or less. But is that really accurate? It's not always the case. But here you can clearly see that. It might be a bit hard to see, but all those dotted lines, they are percentile lines. So they will give you that information, right? Because here I can see that 85% of all the work that I have done so far was done in 16 days or less. So that's really how long it takes me most of the time to do work done. And of course, sometimes it might take longer. So what you can do is click on the dot and understand a bit more context behind it. What happened? So we give you some information when you started it, when you finished it, the cycle time, and then of course, how many days it spent in each workflow stage. And that's a valuable information because you can see it got stuck for quite a while in the dev done part. So what happened? That's not something I can tell you, but this is something that you can go to your team and try to figure out. What was the blocker? What happened? And how can you prevent it from happening again? This is really a great way to understand what happened in the past. And of course, we mentioned start and finish. And of course, from one person to the next, it might not be the same. So that's when you can define yourself what those start and finish means to you. I'm currently showing you example data. So of course, what you see here, the workflow stages, would be the one that are present on your board or your project, right? So those are just examples. And then what you select is what tells us what start and finish means to you. Because data without context doesn't mean much, so you have to tell us the context behind it, right? So here, for example, a piece of work starts when it enters, analysis active, all the way when it enters done. When it's done, we stop counting because it's finished. We don't really care about the rest. But maybe you're interested only when a piece of work enters dev done, and then you're done, right? So see, as you refine what start and finish means to you, the chart will also update. So you can have a broad view about your whole workflow, but also a smaller portion. That's completely up to you. You can change the starting point, the finish points. It's the flexibility that will help you discuss with the team and who needs that information. So now I'm just going to select everything to make it easier. I'm not including my backlog because the time spent in my backlog is not really representative most of the time. But you're really free to do what you want. You have to know your context there as well. The true power of this chart, on top of making you understand what you've done in the past, is that it will help you do single item forecasting. And what I mean by that is that if you look at all the work you've done in the past, and if 85% of the time it took you 16 days or less to complete those pieces of work, you most likely have an 85% chance of starting something today and finishing it in 16 days or less as well. Now, of course, it has to be roughly similar, but that's a good way to have an idea about a single piece of work. Another way that you can use those percentile lines is to set your SLEs. Because if you're aiming, right, to work in 2-week sprints and it's 14 days or less, and here it's basically 16 days or less, you can work and try to improve with the next few charts I'm going to show you and how to keep it down, right? So you can reach your SLEs and set those as SLEs. So that's the main one, right? Looking back at the past. Another chart that focuses on the past, on past data, is the throughput run chart. In simple words, that's just the rate at which you have completed work in the past. So for example, how many tickets have you been closing each day? That's your throughput. And that's very valuable information because it gives you the whole idea of how often do you complete work. If you always wait for the end of your sprint, poof, you will have nothing, a whole bunch of items, nothing, a whole bunch of items. But at the contrary, if you do a bit more often, you will see more ups and downs. That's a really good way to understand as well, how often do you close items? Is that good? Is that bad? That's completely up to you and your context. So same there, that's good information to understand. And same as always, you can click on the dot and see more information about all those different pieces of work. Here, of course, that's example data. With yours, that would be your real data. If you find a piece of work that seems very interesting, what you can do is click on one, click on the item, and it will open it in Jira directly. So you can always find more context behind it. I will come back to this one a bit later because there's a lot more we can do with this one. The next flow matrix is all about what's in progress today, because now we looked at what we've done in the past. Maybe we discovered things that might not be ideal, right? Now let's look at what we can do today, what's happening, and what can we change, right? What can we have an impact on? So for that, we have two charts. We have the edgic work in progress chart that I have on this screen right now, and then another one after that. And this chart, I'm just going to go to any other day to get a bit more variation, right? Will show you all the different pieces of work that you have currently in progress today. And that will help you figure out if you're on track or not to do better, the same, or worse compared to what you've done before. Because if you're not too happy with what you've done in the past, things took too long, things you have gotten stuck, that's this chart that will help you prevent this from happening again. So there's a lot of things on this chart. Let me just explain it to you. You see percentile lines, right? Those we pull from the cycle time scatter plot, the completed items, right? So you can see how you're doing based on that, right? So you can have an idea if you're close to that SLE, your goal, if you're above, and so forth. But the problem is that it's really helpful only at the end of your workflow, because if you know how good you're doing right now, at the beginning, it's hard to know. There's so much more work to do. So that's a good guideline for the end, but it's maybe not enough. And that's when all those colors that you see on the chart comes into play and will give you some really great information. And the colors can be changed. Not this one. So. You can change the colors right here. My apologies. So that it reflects any type of color scheme you prefer. And if you are colorblind, there's always a scheme that should work for you. So now what do those colors show you? They basically show you how items have moved from one workflow stage to the next one in the past. So if I follow the dark green color, it would show me how 50% of my work exited each column each time. So what does that mean? That means that 50% of my work is usually out of analysis active by day 1, out of analysis done by day 3, out of here by day 5, out of here by day 6, and out of here by day 7. The lighter green will show you the same information, but for 70% of your work, and yellow for 85%, and the red will be for the rest. So what it's really telling you is that early on in your workflow, when you have an item, for example, here, that's in the red, it means that it's already older than 95% of all the work that has gone through here before. So what do you do with that information? It's all about helping you understand what should you focus on. What's your number one priority? Is there something to discuss? Because of course, you should focus on closing work, right? Having it closed, you don't want them to get stuck for too long of a period of time. But when things tend to get stuck and seem to be older than the rest, then you can discuss, is it still relevant? Because that can happen, right? You started working on something and actually it doesn't really work. It's not really relevant anymore. Is it too big? Should it be broken down? And in that case, should you close it, create a new issue, or move it back to the backlog? There's a lot that can be done, but at least you can have control over what's happening, discuss it with your team, and make sure that you get less and less of those items in the red and eventually the yellow. What you want to reach is a point that looks a bit more like this, where items are never too old, and hopefully, by doing so and having less outliers, making sure that things go through, right, your cycle time will decrease because they won't just be forgotten on your board. And that's really the chart that can help you save your cycle time and make sure that you become more predictable. So that's this chart. Now let's take a quick look at the last flow metrics, and that's the WIP. Because now we looked at your cycle time, so the amount of work you completed per unit of time, the age of your work. The amount of work is also very important. And here, that's what you see. You see all the different pieces of work that have been in progress at some point in your work, right? And what does in progress mean to you? Remember, that's up to you to tell us. You tell us what does in progress mean. If it's only the dev and testing part, great, just select this. And that will help you here see if there's any trend going on as well. Because there's a very strong assumption that you can usually see from here and then confirm with the other charts. And this is called Little's Law. And the assumption is that the more you have in progress, the less you will be able to accomplish by unit of time, and the most likely it's going to take you longer to complete pieces of work. So it's usually kind of a cycle, right? But not always. So what you need to do is come here and always understand what's happening. If you see a big increase, a big decrease, think about the context. That's why you have the dates, right? Think always about the context behind the data. What happened there? Here, for example, we have a huge increase. We've been working on more and more things. Maybe it's because we recruited more people. So we have more people in the team. That makes sense that we work on more things at once. Then we had a decrease. Was it vacation? Maybe people were off, and that's why we worked on less things. It's not always a bad thing, up and down, but you need to know the context, because it could be a signal to check the other chart and figure out if something is indeed happening. All right, so now we looked at the 4 key flow metrics, and the reason I'm really showing them to you now is that because to be able to forecast accurately or predict how much work you're going to do or try to estimate how much work you should be able to do in the future, it's important to understand what happened in the past and what's happening today. So that's why I want you to focus on those two more. And that's what Actionable Agile is great to help you to start with. Because when you come here for the first time, you might end up with data that's all over the place, right? You know, sometimes you will complete a lot of items, sometimes they take a very long time, and there's not really a structure. But it's understanding what's happening, discussing it with the team, and figuring out what can be improved. And as you go, and you improve, you will see it on the charts, and it will start looking a little bit more manageable. Because the true goal, right, like I said at the beginning, is to be able to forecast what you should be able to do in the future. And to do that, you need control over those. And then you can use different charts that we have to help you with that forecasting. So we have 2 different ways of figuring out what you should be able to do in the future. You can either use Monte Carlo simulation, how many, that will tell you how many pieces of work you're most likely to finish in the future, or when will you be done with a specific amount of items. So let's take a deep dive into this. So I'm currently on Monte Carlo, how many? So now, before you start anything, right, and start looking at this, it's like any good simulations, a good GPS, you need to tell us what is it that you're trying to forecast. So here, I want to know how much work can I accomplish by a due date. So maybe you have a big project coming up or you have a big deadline. Let's say October 1st. How much work can you expect to have accomplished by then? And now you can see some things change on the chart, right? Because it's really fast. And before we start looking at the result, we need to make sure that you understand the data behind it. And here, with Monte Carlo simulations, we don't use story points. We don't use estimate to run simulation and forecast how much work you're likely to do in the future, we're actually looking at how much work you've done in the past and the cadence at which you have completed those pieces of work. So remember when I said that, I mentioned the throughput, right? This might look familiar because this is the throughput trend chart that we are using. As long as what you've been doing in the past is roughly similar to what you're going to do in the future, you should be able to use those data points to forecast accurately the future. And that's when it becomes really important to select the good data, right? You need to use the proper data to forecast. And what do I mean by that? Use that in filter, for example, and making sure that you only look at issues that are in the same category, to make sure that you exclude pieces of work that are not relevant and are very exceptional. You need to know a little bit of your data. But once you've done that, the simulation will do all the work for you when it comes to forecasting. And Monte Carlo simulation, the way they work, it's actually pretty simple. It's take all the values that you have in your throughput. So sometimes you completed 10 items, sometimes 3, sometimes 2, sometimes 0, sometimes 1, sometimes 0. All of those, make them into small balls, put them in a massive jar. And in that jar, we then simulate work being done 10,000 times. If you often complete 20 items a day, you will have a lot of 20s in the jar. So that will be taken into account into the simulations. And then you see the results of all those 10,000 trials right here. That's why you have a distribution, right? Now, if I look at the result now, according to how I've been doing work in the past and to my 10,000 trials, in 95% of all my trials, I managed to do 46 items or more by October 1st. In 85% of all my trials, we managed to do 55 items or more by October 1st, 70%, 64 items or more, 50%, 73 items or more. So what does that mean? Basically, it's giving you confidence level. We're doing probabilistic forecasting, right? There's always a probability and a risk. And then how much risk are you willing to take? That's up to you. We give you the choice. We give you all the data. And then what will you tell your stakeholder, your manager? That's up to you, how confident you need to be. So as you can see, the more certain you have to be that you will achieve a certain amount of items, so for example here, 95%, the more pessimistic the forecast might look compared to if you agree to a bit more risk and agree to a 30% chance of doing less. So like I said, what will you tell your stakeholder manager? It's completely up to you. So that's Monte Carlo, how many? Let me show you Monte Carlo when, and then I will explain to you why estimating is not always the best solution compared to other options out there. So let's look now at the other one. So Monte Carlo when. It works exactly the same way, right? You use the same data, but now in the controls, instead of telling me when, an end date, you tell me a number of items. So maybe you currently have 68 items in your backlog, and you would like to know when will you be done with those. So it's the same simulations, right? It's just the data is displayed a little bit differently. Now it's all about the dates. And because it's dates, of course, we will show it to you on the calendar because it makes a lot more sense, right? So you see the different colors, show you the different confidence level, because then it makes it a lot easier to tell to someone, okay, when will I be done with those 68 items? When? How certain do you have to be with those? And that's what you see right here. That's also a really good way to make sure that you're not given due dates that are not doable. That might help you negotiate a little bit, because if someone comes to me, it's like, Margaux, those need to be done by the 25th of September. I can come here to 25th of September and see what my confidence level is. So based on what we've done so far, right, all the data that we've done, my likelihood of achieving those 68 items by that date is between 35 to 42.5%. Now, is that good enough? Probably not. So that's a good way that you can say, okay, but give me one more week and here's what I should be able to do, or a few more days, or it's all about the scale, right? Making sure that you use data and removing the emotional and the gut feeling that, oh, but we can do it. That's not what the data is telling you. And that's really the true power, I think, of Actionable Agile, is that you get a tooling that will help you show exactly what happened, what you've done in the past, what's happening today, and what is most likely to happen based on what you've been doing. So it makes it a lot easier to just look at data to generate more data rather than just estimate. And what do I mean by estimating? I know in Scrum it's a very common practice, and Safe as well, and some others, where people might think, okay, ooh, that piece of work, I think that's going to be a 12, or that's going to be a 3, or this is a plane, or there's so many scales right out there to estimate how long you think something is going to take. The problem is that it's not very accurate. So most of the time, what you might think you're going to do doesn't match what you actually done. So the best way to plan how much work you're going to do is to do probabilistic forecasting, in which you look at the data that you've done, and as long as, of course, that they are roughly similar to what you're going to do in the future, then you can trust them. It will be there, right? It will give you a forecast. And the beauty of this too is that every day that you do work, right, your throughput will change, either for the better or for the worse, but your forecast will always be accurate. If you run it every other day, you will always know the latest forecast available for your context. Because now today it's 68, maybe tomorrow it will be 56, and then you see how the forecast changes. Because really what you want to do is be able to tell to someone, okay, I have an 85% chance of being done by October 1st, or to complete 56 items by that date. But now you're given a forecast. What happens if things change? You want to be able to act as early as possible and not be just the victim about what's happening. Here, every day that you do work, the forecast changes. So if there's a switch, right, and that something happened with your team, internet went down, you moved offices, something prevented them from doing work the way they usually do, and your forecast looks a lot worse now. Maybe you can look at the data, figure out that, oh, yeah, something is happening, discuss it with them. That's when you would come here. How much work is in progress? Why is it taking so long? What can we do? How should we prioritize? And to make sure that you get things moving again, right? Because maybe you can prevent the forecast that you were given to change, right? You can fix it in between, or you can tell your customers as early as possible that, okay, we won't make this date, but we can do this date with this confidence level. And remember, if you give a high confidence level first and things change a bit, you have a bit of wiggle room in there as well. So that's really the true power of Actionable Agile, is to help you use your real data that you have made, right, to forecast and be confident with your forecast as well, because anyone can give a forecast, but if you don't trust it, what value does it hold for you? So it's really what matters the most, is how much work can you accomplish and what can you do. So that's Actionable Agile in a nutshell. I wanted to go back a little bit more on estimating, right? Because a good way to check if you've been estimating, right, is actually, you can do that in our tool or whichever, and that would be to map the cycle time of your work with the story point value, if you use story point to estimate, right? And the way to do that is to come here, for example, and imagine I've loaded my data. I made sure to include my story point field. I don't have it in my example data, but for the sake of this demo, we're going to use the team field. And this, if that was my story point field, would show my 1, my 3s, my 5s, my 7, and all of my different story points. And if I attribute colors to all of them, let's see what happened. You will see a whole bunch of confettis all over. So now, let's think about this. If story points were a value that represent times, right? A low value represents a small cycle time, and as you go, it increases, right? If that was the truth, according to what I have in front of me, I should have color bands, right? So my 1 pointers would be at the bottom, my 3 pointers slightly above, my 5 pointers slightly above, and so forth. Now, I know I'm not currently showing you real story point data, but I can assure you that this is exactly what happened 99% of the time. I run this with real story point data. Is that items that we thought were going to be really simple ended up taking way longer than we thought, because there's always things you don't know, right? I didn't know I was going to get sick or break my foot at a conference and then couldn't work on the piece of work that I thought. So it took way longer. Think about this too. If you have an impediment, so you're currently working on a piece of work, something easy, letter 3, whatever that means, and then someone comes to you like, oh, Margaux, this has to be fixed right now. So what do? You put that to the side and focus on the task that's urgent. And what happens is that a task that's urgent ends up taking way less time than something else, and something that was going to be easy took way more time than something else. So that's why you can estimate your work. It's always a good way to discuss with your team, figuring out, okay, this seems very complex to me. Why is that? Or maybe I should get trained a bit more on this. Maybe I'm not super sure how to do this. And my colleague, Eloise, might think, oh, easy peasy, let me show you. And then it's all about the conversation over complexity and effort, right? But it does not represent time. Because if I say to Eloise, oh, this is a 21, but she's like, no, that's a 5, it's like, what should it be? Then it's very personal. Then you might have rules with your company to, do it a bit more, like with rules on what those things mean, but it's still very personal to your own knowledge and what complex means to you, right? Your seniority, your experience will impact it. So, of course, you can estimate. You can use estimates to discuss with your team, but don't estimate for time and to estimate for the future, because it's not as accurate. There's much better ways to do that. So to me, the right way to estimate is to discuss with your team how complex something is and how can you make it maybe less complex. How can you learn so that you can have more knowledge? It seems less complex next time you have it, because the less complex something is, it's likely that it's going to take you less time than if something seems very complicated. So, but it's all about that conversation with the team, right? That's really what matters. When you want to forecast the future, use Monte Carlo simulations, use real proven method, and be confident with your forecast. So that's really what I wanted to discuss today, and show you the right way of doing some of the things that people have been doing for a long time, and it might not give them the best result. So that's what I have. And ActionableAgile is available on the Atlassian Marketplace for both cloud and data centers. There's no limit there. It's also available in Azure DevOps and as a standalone app. But if you're interested in it, here's a very nice QR code that you can use that will take you to the Atlassian Marketplace. We can see some more information, but everything is right there. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us, right? We are a whole nice team at 55 Degrees, and we will be really happy to help you if you have questions. And you, of course, have amazing people at onpoint that will be there to guide you through that as well.
Thank you so much, Margaux. Thank you so much for this insightful presentation. I'm sure that everyone else found it really valuable. So thank you so much. So now let's open the floor for questions. So if you have any questions for Margaux, please, about this topic, please write it down in the chat box, and we'll make sure to answer them all.
It's lovely to see familiar names in the chat.
Yeah, you can just write down your questions on the chat box.
I see a question from Taz, who is currently using ActionableAgile in their organization. And that's a very good question, because actually, depending on what your role is, everyone can benefit from ActionableAgile, And you might be interested in different charts. So what do I mean by that? So for example, you might have an agile coach, right? That's there to help you deliver better, right? Understand what's happening, unblock the work. They might look at specific charts like the cycle time scatter plot, like the aging work in progress chart, and understand what's happening and be not flowing super well. A developer and a team lead, for example, might look at the aging work in progress chart in the morning, like, okay, what should we focus on today? How many bugs are in progress? What do we do? How long does it take? It's all about the conversations, really. And if you, for example, follow Scrum, or where there's very precise ceremonies to follow, depending on what your role is and which ceremony you're at, there's always a chart that will help you with that. With the retrospectives, with the scrums of the morning meeting. So I would say it can be anyone, because a project manager, for example, might be interested in the forecast, right? We'll run the forecast and then maybe see, we're not too happy with that date. What can we do to do that? And then they go to the team and discuss how can we prioritize better and so forth. So it can really go across the whole organization. Just not everyone might be interested in the same parts on the app.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Margaux. We have also another question. Yeah. So they asked about how can Actionable Agile be applied across multiple business units that follow different workflows to enhance project delivery forecasting.
So I have a bit of a follow-up question on that to make sure I understand. So you have different business units, so you have different teams doing work. Are they all doing work toward the same goal, toward the same project? If you could drop a message.
Yes.
Because why I'm asking this is that you shouldn't use different teams that are doing different work and try to see how much work they will do together at the end. But if it's for the same project, what you can do is load a filter in Jira that has all the data from those different teams. It's okay if they have different workflow. That's not a big problem. It might be a little bit more convoluted in the data loading part because you will have to map the workflow, right? So you will have to kind of make it match-ish, right? It's just to make sure that things kind of make sense. And then you can still run simulation based on that. So I would say it depends. If the work that they're doing is completely different, is the rate at which they're doing work is completely different, I would need to see the data to really see, because if they divide their work in a different way, that might impact the forecast, right? If someone does team, the other one does Kanban and a mix, or I would say it depends. I know that's not what you want to hear, but it's doable. But for that, I would need to know a bit more of the context. I hope that's enough of an answer. Yeah, that's as often with data, the context behind it matters quite a lot. So it is doable, but to do it right and give more examples, I will need some data.
Okay, so Felice, if we answered your question, if you did not answer your question like specifically, please, like you can write down follow-up comments. Else, you can reach out directly to 55 Degrees, like for like to have like a meeting with them where you can like ask all your questions.
Exactly.
We have another question from Mahder. Is it a standalone platform that can be integrated with other project management platforms?
Yes. So at the moment, yes, I know. So at the moment, we have ActionableAgile integrated in Jira. So you have cloud and data center. The standalone can connect as well to your Jira cloud and your Jira data center. Only if it's publicly available, which it rarely is. For the cloud, it can only load your board. So we have that connection. We have a connection to Trello as well. And then we have a connection where you can load external data. So you need to load a file, right? When it comes to Azure DevOps, we have an Azure DevOps integrated app as well directly. So it's the same, looks exactly the same as what I just showed you in Azure DevOps. We don't yet have other integrations yet, but that's a big project that we will start working on next year. So we have a list of all the different integrations that people have been asking for. So we will start refining that and figuring out the work and start planning. So I know in that list, we've heard things like Monday.com, Asana, Riley. So there's a few different ones. So if you're using something that we don't actually connect to, feel free to just send us your request, because that's always good to know what is it that people are using and what would they want to be able to connect to Actionable Agile. So that's the connections we have right now. And we plan on doing more.
Thank you, Margaux. So I think we answered Philly's question. He said answered. Thank you so much. We have another question from Brenda. She said, "Hi, Margaux. What if there is a lot of variability in the data? What is the potential impact on the Monte Carlo forecasts?"
Yes. So, for example, if sometimes it's 200 items completed per day, sometimes 30, sometimes 50, that will make you a bit less predictable, actually, compared to having a smaller range. So you will still get a forecast, but it might not be as accurate as it could be if you had less outliers. So now you have to figure out, why do sometimes you have huge outliers? And that might be a constraint with your industry. Sometimes, I don't know which industry you are. I know we've met, but is that you might have constraint where things have to be released at specific point, and then you can release smaller things in between. That will be the constraint you will have to have. But then at the same time, the more data you have and the more consistent you are. So the outliers, even though you don't want too much of those, but if it constantly happens, right? That's also valuable, because that will mean that you have enough representative data to do simulations to show that it's most likely to happen again. But I would still put an accent that it will make you slightly less accurate. I hope that answers your question.
I hope it answers your question, Brenda. Please, you can write follow-up comments. Okay, we have another question from Taz. So they said, apparently there are custom fields that are not able to be viewed on Actionable Agile, maybe because it is cascading. How may I solve this so this important custom field shows up?
Yes, so we support most custom field in Actionable Agile, no matter the versions. But the problem is, yes, there's a technical problem if you have cascading fields, because if you select this and then you have different options and then different options again, I'm not fully sure how we can make it work technically. I'm not really sure for this one, what would be the other way to do that. So on this one, I will have to take it with me to the team and figure out with the dev team what would be another solution to make it work, because the field in itself, that won't work. But maybe you can use a different type of field, or there might be some other solutions. So that's my thing. Because in the meantime, something that would be very time consuming that you can do if you really want to use it until we can fix it, you can export your data as a CSV. So you load it into Actionable Agile, export the data, add the field manually, the value, and then you load it back in, and then you can analyze from it. That would be very manual, probably not super fun to do, but that's the only way for now, I would say. Yes, please. Eloise and I would love to take a look at your support ticket and figure it out. And that goes for everyone. If you load data and something is missing, it's not working, you're not fully sure, just reach out to us through support, and we will take a look, check what's wrong, have the dev team fix it if it's fixable. We're there for that. You're welcome.
Thank you, Taz. Okay, we have another question from Sam. I think Taz also answered this question. So he said, can I use this on Azure DevOps?
Exactly, yes. So exactly what I just showed you is available in Azure DevOps Cloud, not server. That's the only difference. We only support Azure DevOps on the cloud. The only difference is the way you load data, because Azure has a different structure for the data. So it's a little bit different. We didn't really go through that now, but that's really the only difference. You don't have the same concept of filters and project in the same way for how the data is stored, but it works. We have documentation on that as well.
Okay, thank you. I hope I answered your question, Sam. Guys, if you have any more questions, please write them down in the comment section. Also, if you have feedback on the webinar, also on Margaux's presentation, please write them down also. We'll be happy to read them all.
Absolutely.
Just wait a few minutes for people to write them in the comment section, and then we can wrap up.
Sorry.
Okay. So just before we wrap up, I would like to mention that if you are really interested in diving deeper into the topics that we have discussed today with Margaux, you have the option of booking a personalized demo. So whether you want to learn about onpoint and how we can customize solutions from Microsoft and Atlassian, or like you would like to explore more about 55 degrees and how you can use Actionable Agile Analytics, we will share with you a follow-up mail where like you can schedule a demo with both of us. Okay, we have another comment from Taz.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to assist those that are suggesting the use of Actionable Agile to managers, leaders, and they are a bit skeptical and might be more likely to cut Actionable Agile when cutting costs?
Yeah, that's something that a lot of teams have as a problem. And usually it's because teams might think, executive might think, oh, we can do it manually, we can do it ourselves, we don't need it. So I think first is to try to show them what problem do you have first. Like, can you forecast accurately? Do you have a steady workflow? Do you have like a predictable way of working that everything is smooth? And if that's the case, great. But still, it's still about what value does the tools bring you? That's what you need to show. Is it because you still struggle, but you're doing better? It's because cutting down the tool that does simulation in a few seconds might mean that you need someone to do it anyway. And if you do it manually, that's very costly and that takes a lot of time. So they might cut on one side, but what they're still likely to spend a lot on the other. So I think it's important to not just look at the cost, but looking at the value that is bringing to your team. Because a team that can manage their workflow, and it's steady, it's going well, even when there's something unpredictable that happens, you can still work on it and you don't have too much stress on the team. It's very valuable. The moment you remove the visualization of the work and that's what's going on, then it becomes more messy, and then that will be the problem that might lead to removing such a tool. So I think it's about focusing on the problem solving, and the value that it's bringing, not just how much it costs. But I know it's in Jira, it's a problem that everybody has access to it. You have to pay for everyone.
Thank you, Margaux. We have another comment from Felice. They said, thank you for your time and knowledge. Love with the energy and support of evidence-based management. Thank you so much, Felice. That's sweet of you.
Thank you.
Okay. Great presentation from Sam. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your attention. So thanks again, all the participants, for being such an engaging audience. And a big thanks, of course, to Margaux for sharing her expertise with us today. Okay, we have one more question from us. Okay, go ahead. Before we wrap up. One last question and then we wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, Taz, you have my email address. You can also reach out if you don't have time to do it now, and we can take it. And depending on what your question is, if it's valuable also for other people, I will share it with Imen, and then she can maybe share it with the rest of you guys. So
Yes.
let's
We will
connect
share
after
with you
this.
a link. Yeah, we will share with you a link, Taz, where you can like book a meeting with the 50 degrees and you can ask all your question. Thank you so much for your understanding. Okay, so as I said, if you have further question, you can just send a request to onpoint or also 55 degrees, and we will be happy to answer them all. And don't forget to check our upcoming webinar, which is happening next Wednesday on the 11th of September, and it is going to be on how to forecast better with Portfolio Forecaster, delivered by Julia, also from 55 degrees. So we would love to see you again, and we are really excited for this webinar too. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a lovely day. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.